in the garden. The title this morning for our message is Fields and Buildings. Fields and Buildings, something that's not uncommon to us here in southeastern Illinois, right? We don't have tremendously large buildings, but we have some buildings, and we have plenty of fields. So, fields and buildings, and I think that'll all kind of come together. I hope it does by the end of the message. This is our scripture this morning, 1 Corinthians. If you have a Pew Bible, in the blue Bible, it's on page 174 in the New Testament side of it. In the red Bible, it's on page 156. So, 1 Corinthians, and that's the very beginning of the 3rd chapter. The text today, I felt like, was kind of divided in 2 parts. The first 4 verses, and then the last 5 is kind of the way I felt like it was kind of divided up. So that's what we're going to do that this morning. It's, of course, Paul writing to the church in Corinth. We're going to hear a little bit more about, not necessarily the history of the church, but kind of a little bit about the church and what was going on there by the 3rd chapter. So since it's the start of that chapter, you know, I usually do your setup as to how or what was going on or what was taking place, but there's not a whole lot of that we need today. But I will give you a warning. I gotta give you warnings, right? A little red sticker warning. That when Paul starts this chapter out, those first 4 verses we're going to talk about, he does do a little bit of toe stepping. Now, I will say that is something that you could immediately write off and say, well, that was because their church, those people, and I don't necessarily just mean inside the church, okay? This was inside their church because he was writing it to the church. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's just to this church. It's to everybody, to every believer anyway, inside this church or anywhere in the world. Some warnings. And you know, I hate to stand up here. I mean, it is hard, really, honestly, seriously. It's hard to stand up here and talk about things that people have trouble with. It really is. If you think that that's easy or that that's just the way you do things, then it's definitely not for me. Now, I don't want to speak for every minister, but it's certainly not for me. But, and in fact, just a couple weeks ago, I was talking with Julie about that after church. We were getting ready to fix some lunch, and it was on my heart. I said, man, I just don't like doing that. I really don't. But one comment that she made is, she said that's a necessary part of things. For all of us to grow, we need some constructive criticism, if you will. We need to be told what we need. And they're God's words that I'm offering to you. So I do believe that's God's voice. It's not mine. We're just talking about it. Okay, I'll give you some examples as we go. And so I'll just tell you like I tell my kids, she said it, so that's the way it is. I know when she's sitting in here with these messages. See, sometimes she's gone. I got to say that she's not here. So, all right, we're going to read the first 4 verses, and I just have to tell her, well, I said something in church. She goes, great, thanks. So, anyway, the first 4 verses, and it looks like the church then had modern day issues, right? That people were the same then as they are now. I know that's a big surprise to everybody, but they were, and he was being very blunt with these people. First 4 verses. Dear brothers and sisters, when I was with you, I couldn't talk to you as I would to spiritual people. I had to talk as though you belonged to this world, or as though you were infants in the Christian life. I had to feed you with milk, not solid food, because you weren't ready for anything stronger. And you still aren't ready. For you are still controlled by your sinful nature. You are jealous of one another and quarrel with each other. Doesn't that prove you are controlled by your sinful nature? Aren't you living like people of the world? When one of you says, I am a follower of Paul, and another says, I follow Apollos, aren't you acting just like people of the world? Okay, so now, as I said, this is a bit divided, so I want to stop there. But Paul was very bluntly telling these people, these early believers, the infant church, these very first churches which were very different from us that they were supposed to be different. Just one time. There we go. I can't get, there we go. That we were supposed to be different. And you can see what was going to go on here in just a minute by that next slide. They were supposed to be different. And I think that that's still a huge hang-up for us today. If it's not in jealousy and quarreling, it may be in another area where God's handed us the bottle and not solid food. Because we're supposed to be different. And that means when we go into the situations that we come into in life, people are supposed to say that we're different. Oh, they won't do that. They won't say that. They won't act that way. And again, these are Paul's words to that church. I won't go into your life and say what needs to be worked on. That's what we're going to talk about today. But we all have them, ministers included. We all have areas we need to work because we're supposed to be different. The Bible tells us over and over that the world's ways are not the same as mine, God says. The world's not the same. Don't think that it is. If there's something worldly going on, you should be different. You should be different. Paul was saying that right off the bat. Set apart, unworldly. I had to talk to you as though you were infants. As though you were infants. As though you belonged to this world. You weren't ready for anything other than milk. Now what that tells me is, Paul said I had to. He didn't say I wanted to. Which means to me that he thought that they should be ready for another level of spiritual teaching and they weren't. How can I teach you about the next level whenever you can't handle the level you're on? That's what he was telling him. And I have to be perfectly honest, guys. I really, really do. I really, really do. I would say that that is probably the one thing that I see that holds more people up or back than anything I see in ministry. And that is they want next level blessing or next level thinking, and they can't handle the level they're on. And I don't mean that mean, and I don't mean that rude. I mean that because it's real, myself included. I spent lots of time, I won't even put a day on it, that I spent at one level wanting the next level. It happens at work, it happens in marriages, it happens just in homes and in lives in general. And that's exactly what he's telling the church. I want to give you food and you need milk. He's given us an example like Jesus himself would that we can understand. Because, as you've already seen, they're having a big trouble with jealousy and quarreling inside the church. Inside the church. And as I said earlier, I'm not going to get personal, but if those are issues for you, you know it, and God knows it, and only you can choose to be different. I can't make that choice for you. Your wife, your husband, your mom, your dad, your kids, nobody can make that choice. It's up to you. Living like people of this world when we should be different. Seriously. Not just something to say and then change when we go out the doors. Seriously different. And then he gives them the example, which is part of the early church, which explains some of this. He gives them the example of the one thing that they're arguing about. One of the things that they have a quarrel about. He says they're listening and acting like people of this world. Now, he talks about Apollos. Now, Apollos was a first century Jewish Christian, okay? A Jew that had converted to Christianity, which is exactly what Paul was, okay? That's exactly what Paul was. So Apollos is identical in that respect to Paul, all right? He's the same. He helped found and develop many of the early churches. Sound familiar? Just like Paul, okay? They were working side by side, doing the same things, but I'm sure doing them a little different. All right? So I'll ask you this. This is the situation the church was in. Have you ever been in a situation where you had two bosses? You had two people to listen to. Okay? By the laughter, I can say you have, you must have. That can be kind of hard, can't it? Because they're never going to be the same. Right? And if some coworker or whoever, somebody in the family might come and say, well, what do you think? Who should I ask? You'd be like, what's the question again? Right? Because that depends on what you might begin by. I'm sure I've all told you the story in our own house. You know, that's a lot the way it is in families, right? And growing up, mine was no different. And you knew who to ask, right? If my kids now, if they ask mom for something, sometimes I think, yeah, they knew what to ask her. Because my answer, they probably knew. Not that her answer was really different all the time. But sometimes when you have two leaders, you got to choose, right? And that's kind of where they were. Kind of where they were. I learned that lesson very hard. Whenever I knew better than to ask Dad, but I asked him first. But Dad didn't give me the answer I wanted. So I proceeded, all of my 6 or 7 years old, to walk into the kitchen and very loudly, which was another big mistake, say, Mom, and ask Mom the same question. And then I heard my father's thundering voice from the living room. Gary Todd, which was not a good sign when Dad called me Gary Todd. You need to come back in the living room. I don't even think he said please. Right? It was a lesson. When you ask one of us, you don't ask the other one if you didn't get the same answer. And that was the good version of what I received that night. So, when you have two leaders, it can be interesting. And that's where the church was. Two leaders. It's natural for us to do a little balancing act with two leaders. But that's also worldly, not godly. And that's what the church was dealing with. That's what he was talking about with the jealousy and the quarreling. I'm sure it was bigger than that, but that's what it was. And then he went on from there. Verses 5 through 9. After all, who is Apollos? Who is Paul? We are only God's servants, through whom you believed the good news. Each of us did the work the Lord gave us. I planted the seed in your hearts, and Apollos watered it. But it was God who made it grow. It is not important who does the planting or who does the watering. What's important is that God makes the seed grow. The one who plants and the one who waters work together with the same purpose, and both will be rewarded for their own hard work. For we are both God's workers, and you are God's field. You are God's building. May God bless the reading of his word this morning. So Paul planted and Apollos watered. That's what Paul just finished saying. I planted and Apollos watered. Now, that could mean any number of things. To me, it means that Paul was there initially. He got everything started, and then Apollos came along and kind of nurtured and took over things. Now, the Bible doesn't say that. That's just what I'm assuming by Paul using those terms. That's what he said. Paul found maybe, and Apollos kept it up. But he was very, very, very quick to say, but it was God that made that seed in their hearts grow. What's important is that God made the seed grow. What's important is God made it grow. He goes on to say that we'll be rewarded for our work. It's not that we won't be rewarded for that work, that it was insignificant, but that's not what's important. What's important is what God did with it. Because we together, I, in the very end, am what? We're God's fields and we're God's buildings. We're God's fields and buildings. You ever felt like a field? You ever felt like a building? Well, you can know now that the Bible says you are. The Bible says you are. You and I. And this week, obviously before the rain, I was right beside a field where a farmer was working. And I mean, he was really working the ground at that point. It was early in the week. And you know, if you've ever been around that, even if it's not in that situation, but you know like that smell when you drive down the road or something, that turned earth, there's just something about it. You don't have to be a farmer, just kind of like, whoa, yeah, you know, that's just something about that. It just feels right. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about that smell. The dirt was flying, you know, and it just felt like spring and that things were really happening, right? And for the best possible harvest, they need to do that. They need to prepare that field, okay? And I know that that's changed immensely over time, but they need to prepare that field. Maybe it needed sprayed, it needed tilled, it needed fertilized. Certainly it needed planted. And then you get into the hoping for the good weather, right, with rain, kind of, some sun. We all know the process. But have any of you ever set aside, I've seen a field that's been set aside for some time. Maybe on purpose or maybe not, for whatever reason. A field that's just been set aside. No tilling, no spraying, no hard work. The fields look a whole lot different than those ones that they spend so much time preparing for planting. I would say that they look a little bit like this. They look a little neglected. I mean, when you compare them to one that's been worked on and one that hasn't. In fact, I've seen several of those fields in my time, and one of them, I have to tell you, is the best deer hunt I've ever had. All right? Because it used to be a field, and you could tell where the fence rows used to be, but now the trees were starting to grow up in it. It was getting thick, and the deer loved it. They could hide in there and then come out and eat, hide back in there. It was great. Because it had been neglected for farming. It had grown up. It was overgrown. Trees and honeysuckle and blackberries. It was out of shape, and at that point, unplantable. Unplantable for a farmer. So, now I'll go from that, and that picture in your mind, to another place that I know will be very familiar to you. Have any of you ever had a home improvement project that needed done? Maybe one right now. I'm seeing some head nods. No amens, but that's just because you don't want to say it out loud. I got you. It may be a large project, right? Something that's really big you have planned out. Or maybe it's just something that's really small. Could be something that you could do in a few minutes if you wanted to. Just a slight improvement. And then I'm going to ask you, and don't you answer, trust me, I'm going to put myself under the bus for this one. I'm going to ask you how long that's been on your list. Your home improvement list. Now ladies, you cannot answer for someone else. Julie, you can't answer for me. That's pretty much what I was saying right there. Okay? How long has it been on your list? Has it been on your list for days, this home improvement project you need? Something that you just found out about that just, doggone it, I haven't had any time in the last couple of days to get there because it's outside and it's raining and I'm not putting my boots on to do this. I'll wait until it dries up. That kind of thing. Or has it been weeks where you were waiting for a rainy day to do it, but now you've had 3 or 4 and you just still haven't done it? Okay? Or has it been months? And notice I stopped there because I didn't want Jack to have to put too many things on there. I didn't put years. Do we have a few years out there where there's a home improvement project that's been around for that long? To avoid elbows or maybe a sense of depression coming over you, I'm going to tell you about my projects. You don't have to do yours. Okay? My projects. We're going to have a front porch built on our home. Okay? Now, it's not a big one, but it's bigger than what we have. Now, I got to tell you, monkey's off my back on that one because we're hiring that one done. Okay? It's been a while, but that's not my baby. Okay? But that's a project that needs to be done. It's an improvement. Okay? It's something that needs to be done. I will say that on Sunday mornings before breakfast, I go up and get the kids up, and I've been told by both the ladies under my roof that Jillian's closet door needs to be fixed. And I was just told that yesterday. It probably fits under weeks. Okay? Now, I keep making excuses. It'd probably take me 15 minutes. And if I say I didn't have 15 minutes in the last few weeks, that would not be true. I could have done it, but it's still there. I almost did it yesterday. Okay? On a smaller level, there might be a pile or two of little papers around the house that I need to pick up. Small piles, one or two. Not bad. No, Franny, they're not that big. They're more like this. Do you have anything like that? Now, I will say, yesterday morning in the rain, I cleaned up 2 of those piles. The 2 that bother my beautiful wife the most. And in that pile, I found something I told Pat about earlier that I thought I had lost. And I also found a very nice card from a couple that's with us today that they had written me a while back. Piles are good to go through and get rid of. I didn't get rid of all of it. I just cleaned it up a little. Okay? So you get it. There are home improvements of all shapes and sizes, and those are a few of mine. You get the point, I hope. And aren't you glad I didn't use yours? But here's the real deal. When we're going to have company, Julie gets my little piles picked up. Or she tries to get me to do it. Sometimes I can get it in the amount of time I have, and sometimes I can't. Because we don't want company to do what? To see them. Right? Now, they're not going to go up and open Jillian's closet door. But they might see one of my piles on the kitchen counter. Because they become so easy to overlook day in and day out. We have excuses like I'm too tired, I'm too busy, I don't want to. When we lived in our first house on Eastgate, we had a few of these minor repairs, and guess when I finally fixed them? When I got ready to sell it. Because I didn't want somebody to see them. Right? I had lived with some of those for a year. And I fixed it, and I swore I'd never do that again. Because I think, why didn't I get to enjoy this? I'm just fixing it for the next guy. Right? That's what we do. But what God and what Paul was saying is, we all need repairs in our lives. We're fields. We're buildings. God is saying, it might be a great big repair that you have in your life. Or it might just be a pile of papers. But if God were coming over to visit your house, this building, what would he say? What would he want you to do? What repairs do you need to make to this field and this building that you wouldn't want God to see, even though you know he sees them? They may be great big things. They may be quarreling. They may be gossiping. They may be things that the world would consider bad. But I have to tell you, those are human scales. God doesn't rank things like we do. He doesn't rank things like we do. What do we need to do? Because it may just be that some of our fields have a few briars. Have you ever been through a field that has briars? Yeah. If it gets you a little, don't keep walking. It'll get you a lot. Because sometimes when we need to repair things, we come up with a lot of those. And we're going to end this different. But sometimes we have that. Not just with our homes, but with our hearts and with our lives. Paul said that we're God's fields. We're God's building. So we may need to tear down a few walls and remodel. Maybe we just need to dust a shelf. God knows, and so do you. If God's coming, what do you need to do? I'm simply challenging you to look and to change if that's what we need to do. Because I do believe that that's God's voice in your ear. It's not mine. Fields and buildings. Because this is what we want. As we go through life, this is where we want to be. We want our lives to be beautiful. Like that field that's tilled and growing and beautiful. The buildings that we see that are perfectly manicured and in shape, and the trim's painted, and the doors on right, and beautiful. That's why God challenges us. Growing. Always developing. Always growing. And standing strong. If we're not challenged, we become complacent. We don't challenge ourselves often enough. God does. God does. And Paul was telling the early church, hey, I want to go to the next level with you, but you have to work with me. God tells us that so that we end up standing strong. And what's awesome is He put us here together. He put us here together as family to see each other through those times. The times that we can become beautiful, that we can grow, and that together we can stand strong. That's what He wants us to have. That's what He wants us to have. And I pray that we do. And that we do that together. For Him and with each other. Will you pray with me, please? Our God and our Father, we thank you for your word and your ways, Father. It's a challenge at times to see this world and to not get caught up in it. Father, as your word has clearly told us, we're your fields and we're your buildings. Father, help us to keep the weeds out. Help us to keep the piles picked up. To be beautiful. To grow and be strong as you would have us to be. I thank you for this chance to offer your word. And Father, to challenge myself as we go through this life together. May we feel your peace and may we know your ways as we follow your light. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Now we will have our time of our hymn of invitation.